Many people think that classical music is dead, but it is far from it. There are actually more subgenres in classical music in the past 130 years, over 10, than there were in the previous 1500, about 5. The 4 major modern genres are modernism, impressionism, expressionism, and postmodernism.
Don't worry about it.
Postmodernism is in turn broken down into subgenres, which I will talk about in my presentation. Each of these have their own distinct style or styles that sets them apart from all or at least most of the others.
Beautiful. I will.
Is this your thesis
don't worry about
That was
writing
my
that.
thesis statement, but you don't have to
Don't worry about writing all that down. I'll post it to Sheriff. Did everybody hear it?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
And I'm sure you'll be illuminated as Rowan goes.
I need to get my doctorate.
Just have one.
Tie my shoe without looking.
So, of course, we are going to start by defining what modern classical music is, just as a brief overview. So, does anyone have any ideas as to, after hearing my thesis statement, what you think it is? Anyone? Finn?
It's probably not very different from other classical music. I mean, it's still classical music.
Just a more recent?
Yeah.
Jace?
Yeah, so probably classical style music that's been written within the past century.
Very good definition. So we're going to take the classical music out of that and define what classical music is. So, definition of classical music is art music from about 1730 to 1820. Now, that's not what most people would define classical music as, but we'll get to that later. So, from that we can use it to say that modern classical music is art music from about 1890 to 1945. Now that seems kind of counterintuitive because it's not 1945 currently. You would think that modern would go to the present, but we don't like that definition of classical music. We want to use that definition of classical music. So classical music from about 1730, that's the same, no it's not. It's classical music from about 1730 to 1820. See, it's the same time range, but it's classical music with lowercase c and lowercase m versus art music. So we can take classical music down there and define classical rock, pop, and jazz, all lowercase. Classical music from about 1890 to present. Now there's some classical music that's from after then that's not modernism, not modern classical music, but by and large that's what it is. So there's our definition. Just as an aside, we'll talk about this later, modern classical music capitalized is just modernism. Some definitions. It seems that would be an issue. There we go. So, dissonance is these are just some musical terms that I will be referring to. So, dissonance is like when chords sound or notes sound ugly, like that's dissonant, and that's dissonant. That used to be considered dissonant, but now it's not. That's dissonant. A bunch of dissonant, ugly sounding things. Alright. Meter, at least in the context that I'll be talking about it, is the number of beats in a measure, or like bit of music. Like when you're tapping your toes to music, normally you're tapping it on the beat, and normally they're in sections. Each section is called a measure. The key is like a scale. It's not exactly, but there's major keys and minor keys. Major scale. That was C major, and there are different major scales, each that are different key. Rhythm is the pattern of note lengths in a piece of music, and dynamics is how loud or soft something is, pretty much. So, this is a timeline of classical music. It starts with medieval, which is about 400 to 1400, and the Renaissance, 1400 to 1600. I won't be talking about those as much, but and you have Baroque, which is about 1600 to 1760, classical, 1730 to 1820, Romantic, 1780 to 1950, Modernism, 1890 to 1945, Post-Modernism, 1930 to present, and Contemporary, which is 1945 to present. However, we're only going to be focusing on the stuff that's now not shaded out. That's modern classical music, lowercase. So if you remember, there was modern classical music, lowercase letters, lowercase. So pre-modernism would be all of this stuff before modernism. Baroque is Handel and Bach. You've probably heard Handel's Messiah, which should be opening here shortly. There we go. So I've almost definitely heard this.
Oh yeah.
This isn't a great recording, but everyone's heard this. It's a great example of Baroque music, section of Handel's Messiah. So you have classical, which is, again, 1730 to 1820. Bach, from the Baroque period, wrote the rules for it. And then Beethoven's Ninth Symphony basically completely broke down. You know, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, Freude, schöne Goethe, Funken. I used to sing that all the time in group 2.
Yes, you did.
So, and then Mozart is also a very commonly known classical composer. Romantic, famous composers are Brahms and Verdi. Not quite as famous as from the classical period. And then you have Grieg, who wrote the Hall of the Mountain King. Dun, 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 dun. Everyone knows that too, probably. Maybe not as much as Beethoven's Ninth and Handel's Messiah, but... no, everyone's singing it. Yeah, I told you everyone knows it. This is also true. So, now we have modernism. Many debated start and end times, but the most commonly used is 1890 to 1945. Some of the major aspects of it were lack of tonality, or lack of complete tonality, lack of a set meter, and an attitude. It's an attitude rather than just a set time frame, a writing style, and it rejects traditional rules and theory. So, we have atonal and the 12-tone technique, which was probably invented by Arnold Schoenberg, but we don't really know. And gives each note of the chromatic scale equal use. I'll play the chromatic scale in a bit. Many composers, such as Stravinsky, who were originally completely against it, then adopted it later in their career. And it was illegal in Nazi Germany because it was degenerate and sounded awful, which you'll
What's it
see
called?
later. What's what called?
The type of music that's illegal in Germany.
Atonal, 12-tone music. I try to keep the titles of the slides to what we're talking about.
Jace has a question too.
Jace,
So what exactly is 12-tone music?
I'm getting it. So you'll get to listen to some later in my next genre, but I'm going to play some scales. The first one I'm going to play is the ascending and descending 12-tone chromatic scale. So this sounds pretty weird because you're expecting the usual major scale. Descend. And there's also the minor scale, which I'm going to play somewhere else because it's easier. It's also commonly used. So there's the pentatonic scales, which are common in the Middle East. Whole tone scales. That last bit of dissonance at the end was unintentional. But many of these scales were used more by many composers in the modernist era.
I have a quick one. We seem to be having the same technical issue. I don't know why, like where everything's not on the TV screen.
That's
right?
just I think that's just the TV.
No, on the left. Was that supposed to be on?
This?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be on over here,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
which it is.
It's working there. All right.
But then if I
Don't
go
use
over
Zoom
here,
was it? Okay, gotcha.
it's different.
Okay, that's fine. Sorry.
A good piece of music doesn't need to sound good, which is like a completely new thing. I'm also very counterintuitive. Music could be good in theory, but not in practice. Like atonal music falls into that category for most people. It could be impressive, like somebody did a bunch of things that are completely new, never done before, but then it's like, it's impressive. Mahler, Strauss, and Debussy. They all started as romantic, but then went off and did their own thing, pretty much. So we'll talk about some of these composers a bit later. I don't know that I might talk about Strauss, but the other two definitely. So, free rhythmic was used by Stravinsky and me in my composition, which you'll get to hear later. Uses multiple meters, which I defined earlier, or rhythms simultaneously, or frequently changing meters. Sometimes even no meter at all. So, many of that. Stravinsky used that a lot. So, Gustav Mahler and Ralph von Williams wrote long, not so much von Williams, but one of Mahler's symphonies was 90 minutes long. One of his also contained a love song for his wife, so it's very emotional symphonies, and this acted as a bridge from Romanticism into modernism. So, during the interwar period, so between World War I and World War II, many composers went back to older styles of music, which was then referred to as neoclassicism, neo-romanticism. Some of these words I made up because they're used, but it's not really a word. So these were used mainly in the interwar period. So that was modernism. Now we have Expressionism, which is not like modernism at all, except most of the styles are like exactly the same. So, yeah, I can't tell the difference. It sounds the same to me. So, this term, like Expressionism, which we'll talk about in a bit, originated in visual arts, but then was then applied to music and architecture, other art, forms of art. Again, lack of set meter, lack of complete tonality. It's an attitude, not a set time. Again, it's not. Okay.
So, I know Impressionism painter, like Monet, and would people look at the artwork and then think about music or think about other art differently because they saw that change?
If you went to an art gallery of Impressionist art, they might play Impressionist music in the background. Or if you went to an art gallery about Expressionist art, they might play Expressionist music in the background.
I was wondering what the influence.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
So again, it's not like modernism at all, but when I advance to the next slide, you'll see that 2 of the 4 things I'm going to talk about are exactly the same. So, 12-tone technique and free rhythmic we already talked about, so I'm not going to talk about them again because there's no point. So, Debussy and Ravel were probably the most important Impressionist composers. Yeah, they both completely reject the term. It's a thing that many composers do. They say, like, I don't want to be classified as anything. I don't want to classify myself as anything. So I want the music critics to do that for me. And music critics come along and say, "You're Impressionist." I'm not Impressionist. It's your fault. So, I just think that's kind of funny. More complex and dissonant chords were used during the Romantic period. Not the Romantic period. What is this? The Impressionist period. So, during the Romantic period, like you have your standard like chord, but then there's the sevenths, which are dissonant. But then your ninths, which are more dissonant, 13ths, and then if you go back all the way back, no, that's 11ths, sorry, then 13ths, but then you can go all the way back up to the double octave. Sounds very crunchy and awful in my opinion. But they wanted complex and dissonant chords, so that's on them. And I was supposed to play all of that on that slide apparently. But so that was Impressionism. I'll move on to Expressionism. Again, the term originated in the visual arts. And it's an attitude again. Again, we're going to skip the 12-tone technique. But, so it avoids traditional forms of beauty, making it sound dissonant and mean frequently. This term was also used when describing expressionist visual arts. So, the second Viennese school, which was Arnold Schoenberg, who we talked about earlier, and his school of thought. Schoenberg's pupils Anton Weber and Alan Berg were also part of the second Viennese school. So on the side, the first Viennese school was Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, which goes to show what Schoenberg thought of himself. So it's Impressionism is based around conveying emotion, mainly fear, which was used again by done mainly by using lots of dissonance. So contrast was used a lot. Contrast in individual notes creating dissonance again, like that note, they contrast a lot, dissonance. Melodic leaps, jumping around a bit, also contrast in notes. Might have like an octave jump in the melody, or a 2-octave jump in the melody. Like somebody's singing up here, up there, and then another singing down there. It's 2-octave jump.
That's a good thing.
So and then contrast in dynamics, you have something very soft, and then something really loud, or the other way around. So the term Expressionism was probably first applied to Schoenberg in about 1918, even though Expressionism began in 1908. So Schoenberg can also be spelled, just as an aside, Schoenberg can also be spelled with an O-E instead of an O-umlaut, like that. But should still be pronounced Schoenberg, not Schoenberg. Some people pronounce it that way, but it's wrong. Post-Modernism. So it's technically just a time frame. However, many of the styles completely reject both modernist styles as well as the styles of traditionalism. So again, it's just a time frame of styles. Film music was more common because there were more films to write music for, and film music tended to go back to older, more tonal styles of music, and they were relatively easy to listen to, not like easy listening music, but you didn't have to think about it too much, Kate.
Well, I wrote down right before this, just under my questions, like silent films, because like around the time periods when like silent movies, and a lot of that, like when you were talking about contrast and things and expressionism, like you can hear, was that like kind of what you're talking about too, that background to silent film, like
like if there was music, yeah, like just to films in general. Because even modern films have soundtracks. Minimalism, obviously, it's an extremely minimalistic approach to writing music. It's just using just the notes and patterns that are necessary to convey whatever message you're trying to convey. Lamont Young, Terry Riley, Steve Reich, and Philip Glass were first minimalist composers. However, John Adams is not the president. He's also famous. However, he started later and is not considered to be among the first few. Household items and primitive instruments, such as like a beer bottle, were used as instruments, or even like recording sounds in nature, and then like, playing them back. That's my piece of music or whatever. Long pieces, sometimes even up to 6 hours long, meant to last an entire evening for dinner parties or whatever. More informal. So, 4:33, I just had to put this up here. It's simply 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, interspersed, at least in this performance, by random sounds such as the opening and closing of the lid of the piano. You see the piano lid is closed there, and he's got his stopwatch in his hand. He beeps that every now and then. And it got Best Christmas Song of the Year in the United Kingdom in 2010. Also just wanted some quiet, peace and quiet for once. So, and I'm just going to prepare you for the next 2 slides, which are about post-minimalism. They're about the same style, however the slides are different. There is one slight difference in them, or 2 slight differences actually. Pay careful attention, and there are exactly no errors in them. I spent like 20 minutes trying to make sure that there were no errors in them. So, post-minimalism is an expansion of minimalism by a later generation in a more traditional concert format. And you have post-minimalism.
Wait. Okay, continue.
Which is spelled differently, yes. Which is an expansion of minimalism by the same generation, move out of the way, in a more traditional concert format. So they're very similar styles. However, for some reason people use different spelling of post-minimalism when describing composers such as John Adams, who for some reason goes under the first kind of post-minimalism, versus Young and Glass, who fall under this variety of post-minimalism. So these styles are very similar to minimalism, but again, they're in a traditional concert format. Like you go sit down and listen to the opera rather than you have whatever playing in the background while you're eating your cheese. So now we have contemporary, which I just put all of the stuff that wasn't minimalism or post-minimalism in here. So it's about starting in 1945. Sometimes people would say 1975. Hasn't yet. It contains themes from many other cultures specifically Jewish themes. I don't know if this had anything to do with Leonard Bernstein, who wrote lots of pieces that were completely based around like Jewish pieces. And we'll get to listen to some of his music a bit later. So again, it has a debated time frame, but it's not a set of styles. Contemporary polystylism, just, again, styles from other genres. Many different styles, even within a movement, a section of the piece, and themes influenced by random things, houses and tables. Not quite sure how they pulled that off, but whatever. New Simplicity was a purposeful movement, rather than something that evolved like much of the others. It contained simple textures, and it was neo-romantic, mainly romantic, though other styles as well. New Complexity, which is used atonal, even microtonal, like the Indian 22-note scale. Standard chromatic scale on piano is 12-note scale, but they used notes that were in between this note and this note. When this note was played at the same time as this note and the note between those two, and you get something really crunchy. Began in Great Britain, but eventually spread to other countries. Again, abrupt changes in style and dynamics, even more than in using Expressionism. And you have 21st century, which technically, of course, begins in 2000, but the styles began around 2000, not necessarily right at 2000. Again, it's just a time frame, but there were many styles that were very common in it. Used styles from other genres and time frames again. Seems to be a fairly common thing. Female composers were more respected. Like females were more respected in general. Like that's what happens as time goes on. Jewish styles were used even more. And folk and medieval styles were also used. So that concludes my first genre. And any questions on that part? Sophia.
Can you clarify the females becoming more respected part and
So there have been female composers for a long time, but you basically never hear about them because that's how society works, mainly, unfortunately. But during the more recently, female composers have become steadily more respected.
So it's closer to like the 21st?
Like
Really, that's
in the 21st century, like
Yeah.
that's when.
so really correlating with like the women's movement, probably.
Yep. Although there was
Not that
Hildegard von Bingen in the 10th century, who we still talk about.
didn't
Quite a
Eloise talk about her?
Yes, a bit. Played a few pieces, but I think. Nathan?
Yeah, is there, have you noticed, as time goes on, is there an impact of tech to classical music?
An impact of what?
Technology?
No.
It's a good question. Yes, there has been. Like I said earlier, recording like sounds like you can go out and record your stream during the thunderstorm, and that's your piece of music. Clearly, you need technology for that. But also, even instruments develop, of course. There are electronic instruments like this synthesizer I have up here.
Like Philip Glass, his music definitely wasn't very.
It wasn't like, and then there, of course, there's techno music, which some people consider to be classical music. Some is, some isn't. But synthesizers are now a very common instrument. Like, you have your master score, and one of the instruments there is a synthesizer. It's just something standard. First.
So what exactly, just clarifying, the time frame for modern classical music, is it 1890 to present or 1945 to present? Or am I
So
wrong?
modern classical music with
Your
lowercase
definition of mine.
with lowercase m, lowercase c, and the other lowercase m
Right.
would be from the definition I use is from 1890 to the present.
Okay.
However, if you capitalize all of those, then it's 1890 to 1945. So some people would say 1975.
Right. Okay.
And then there's contemporary, which is 1945 to the present.
Sure.
So there are many different terms floating around that are similar but not the same. Any other questions on my first genre? Dad?
You had a question about, or slide about atonal and 12-tone music, where there's sort of a rejection of classical music theory.
Yes?
And then you come up with a statement that the piece can be good in theory, even if it doesn't sound good. And so are they developing new theories for 12-tone music? Some sort of framework to judge that it's good, you broke all the rules the right way, and so it's a good piece of music? Or
I don't know. But then also, like, you can convey a message. Like music that sounds terrible because it's very dissonant could convey the message that you're trying to convey well, and so that would be good, even if it sounds awful. Because it's supposed to sound awful. So, that was my first genre. Now we will move on to my second genre, which is a discussion. I was going to print something off for you guys so that you would have what I was playing, but unfortunately I didn't get around to that. So.
Oh,
okay.
what program are you using? Because I like it a lot better than Google Slides.
It's Prezi. I think I said that earlier, but yeah, it's Prezi. It's kind of annoying because there's no, like, you know, like in most programs you have like the bar and you type in what font you want or you select it from the list. This you just have make the font bigger or make the font smaller, which is annoying. And the fonts are limited, you have to get used to the fonts. But
overall, it's better.
it's, you have fewer options for animations, but you also have like the zoom function.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's proven to be more mentally engaging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I felt engaged.
Good
On the other hand, it gives some people nausea. So then there's that. So. So, now we're going to have a discussion where I will play some pieces of music and then we're going to discuss them. The first piece of music is, the first three pieces of music are going to be in the, I'm going to be asking about like what style do you think it's from and why do you think it's from that style. These three, I don't really expect you to be able to figure it out, so I have the answers and I will tell you at the end. And since we're pressed for time, I'm gonna like try to keep it to only a few minutes per discussion section. So I'll play the first one, which is the fourth song in the song series Songs of a Wayfarer by Gustav Mahler.